Will you let him die in vain?
What crumbs of it may be snatched, I will devour.
Rhaenyra is no queen.
Something shifted in that trailer. Not just the battles, not just the fire, and not just the bodies floating in the sea after the Battle of the Gullet. Something deeper changed. Something in Rhaenyra's eyes. The woman who once bled grief when she lost Lucerys, who retreated into mourning and left her allies waiting. That woman appears to be gone. What replaced her is something far more dangerous, far more unpredictable, and according to this trailer, far more willing to burn everything down to get what she believes is rightfully hers. Season 3 of House of the Dragon has already arrived with force, but Episode 2 looks like the point of no return. There are details buried in this trailer that most people scrolled past, lines of dialogue that hit differently when you slow them down, and a transformation unfolding in Rhaenyra that may ultimately decide who lives, who dies, and who sits on the Iron Throne. This is the House of the Dragon season. 3 Episode 2 trailer broken down completely. The Battle of the Gullet was always going to leave scars. It was always going to cost lives. But what the show did in the Season 3 premiere, and what this trailer for Episode 2 is now building upon, is far more devastating than a simple war casualty. Jacaerys Velaryon, Rhaenyra's eldest son, her heir, the young man she raised to one day lead, is dead, and the way he died makes it worse. He did not fall in a private moment or in some quiet corner of the war. He fell in the chaos of a battle, struck by arrows, his dragon pulled beneath the water while others cheered around him. That image of a prince dying while enemies celebrated is the kind of wound that does not close. It festers, it transforms, and the trailer for Episode 2 makes clear that it is already doing exactly that to Rhaenyra. The trailer opens in the immediate aftermath of the battle. Baela is riding away from the carnage, and even through the movement and the noise of everything around her, the devastation on her face is impossible to miss. She's not just grieving a cousin, she's carrying something heavier than that. The particular kind of pain that comes from watching someone you love die and being able to do nothing about it. She was there. She saw what happened to Jace, and now she has to carry that memory forward into whatever comes next. Then comes the moment that stops the trailer completely. The music building underneath everything suddenly falls away, and Rhaenyra's voice cuts through the silence. She says, quietly and with a weight that is almost unbearable to hear, "Jace, what have you done?" It is 4 words, and yet those 4 words contain an entire world of grief, of disbelief, of a mother who is only beginning to understand the full shape of what she has lost. Then the camera shows us Jace's body being carried through, and Baela is still there, still wearing that expression that has not changed since the battle ended. The question of who exactly Rhaenyra is speaking to when she says those words is genuinely interesting. It could be directed at her son's body, a mother's impossible plea to a person who can no longer answer her. But it could also be directed at Rhaena, Rhaenyra's younger daughter, who entered the Battle of the Gullet riding Sheepstealer, an untrained dragon, without permission or preparation. The theory that Jace became distracted during the battle because of Rhaena's presence is not just speculation. It is the kind of tragedy that war is filled with, where the desire to protect someone you love ends up costing you your own life. If Rhaenyra believes that Rhaena's decision played any role in Jace's death, the confrontation between them is going to be one of the most emotionally charged scenes of the season. What makes this even more complicated is Rhaena herself. After she and Sheepstealer landed following the battle, the look on her face speaks without any dialogue being needed. She already knows. Whatever Rhaenyra says or does not say, whatever punishment is delivered or withheld, Rhaena is going to carry the possibility that she contributed to her brother's death for the rest of her life. That kind of guilt does not simply disappear. It reshapes a person. The sea still holds the dead when the trailer shows us the next image of consequence. Bodies from the battle remain in the water, and then we see Lord Corlys Velaryon washing up onto the shore. The sea snake is alive. He survived his confrontation with Lohar, and his survival is not a small thing. It is a strategic lifeline for the Black faction at a moment when they are reeling. Corlys is not only a military asset, he has political credibility, naval power, and decades of experience. His survival, set against the death of Jace, gives the Blacks something to hold on to, even as the ground shifts beneath them. And then comes the line that reframes everything that follows. Over the image of the sea and its dead, Rhaenyra's voice returns, and this time she says simply, "How could you?" It is grief without a specific target. It could be aimed at Jace for dying, at Rhaena for flying into battle, at the Queen's Guard who locked Rhaenyra away during the battle following Jace's orders, leaving her helpless to intervene. The ambiguity is the point. Rhaenyra herself may not fully know yet where to direct what she is feeling, and that confusion is exactly the kind of emotional raw material that Daemon Targaryen knows how to shape. Because Daemon arrives in this trailer with purpose. He finds Rhaenyra crying into the bed, and he does not simply comfort her. He challenges her. He says, "Will you let him die in vain?" It is a calculated question dressed in the language of love, and it is entirely consistent with who Daemon has always been. He does not grieve the way others grieve. He transforms grief into fuel. And right now, with Rhaenyra at her most vulnerable and her most dangerous, Daemon is the one holding the match. There is a line buried near the middle of this trailer that most people heard but did not fully register. When Rhaenyra finally speaks beyond her grief and beyond her tears, she says this, "I will never have justice, but what crumbs of it I snatch, I will devour." It is easy to let that line pass as dramatic dialogue, as another moment of emotional escalation in a show that runs on emotional escalation. But listen to it again. Really listen to what she's actually saying. She is not claiming she will win. She is not claiming she will sit on the throne and look down at her enemies from a position of power and feel whole. She is saying that true justice, the kind that restores what was taken, that gives her back her sons, that undoes the grief and the blood and the years of fighting, is something she already knows she will never have. And that despite knowing that, she will still take whatever she can grab, and she will consume every fragment of it. That is not the declaration of a queen who believes in her own destiny. That is the declaration of a woman who has already accepted a kind of permanent loss and decided to fight anyway. This line matters enormously because it subtly shifts what the audience should be rooting for, or at least how they should be watching. Rhaenyra is no longer on a journey toward triumph. She may be on a journey toward something far more complicated, a victory that tastes like ash, a throne she will sit on alone, surrounded by the ghosts of everyone she sacrificed to get there. The show has always been interested in the cost of power, but this line signals that Rhaenyra herself now understands the bill she is paying. She is not deluded, she is not blind, she knows what this war is taking from her, and she has decided to keep going anyway. The detail that connects to this is the slow-motion shot of a young boy that appears in the latter half of the trailer. It is easy to assume this is background imagery, scenery to suggest collateral damage, but its placement is deliberate. It appears precisely during the sequence when the trailer is building toward its emotional peak, when lines about burning and killing and never embracing Rhaenyra are stacking on top of each other. That child is not a background detail. That child is the argument the show is quietly making, that every great claim to power, every righteous cause, every throne worth fighting for destroys people who never asked to be part of the fight. The most fascinating and potentially explosive thread running through this trailer involves Hugh Hammer, Adam of Hull, and Alf the White, 3 dragonseeds who appear on their knees before Rhaenyra and Daemon. In the source material, both Alf and Hugh ultimately betray Rhaenyra in what becomes one of the most consequential and bitter turns of the Dance of the Dragons. But this trailer may be showing us something different, something that suggests the show is considering altering that arc in a meaningful way. When Hugh, Adam, and Alf are seen kneeling together and Daemon draws his sword, the camera does something specific. Both Adam and Alf turn to look directly at Hugh. Not at Rhaenyra, not at Daemon, at Hugh. And in the previous episode, the seeds of Hugh's discontent were already being planted, with moments that showed him as ungrateful, restless, and